Go ahead and call the Military Personnel Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone to the first hearing of the Military Personnel Subcommittee on the 15 recommendations to modernize the military compensation and retirement system suggested by the Military Compensation and Retirement Modernization Commission. We appreciate the Commission's diligent and comprehensive review of the military pay and benefit system and believe their thoughtful recommendations deserve our attention and careful study. We want to assure everyone that the Military Personnel Subcommittee will take every opportunity to thoroughly review and discuss them in the coming months. We are fully committed to improving the welfare and quality of life for both current members of our armed services and our veterans, while ensuring we keep our nation safe and secure. Our purpose today, following last week's full committee hearing, is to begin the subcommittee's effort to understand the assumptions, rationale, and details behind the Commission's recommendations. A key consideration for our work is the continued viability of the all-volunteer force, which has been well sustained by our current compensation system since its inception. Most importantly, we must not break faith with our service members and undermine our efforts to recruit and retain the best and brightest in our armed forces. Before I introduce our panel, let me offer Congresswoman Davis an opportunity to make her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to welcome back the commissioners. You've all been very, very busy, and we appreciate the dedication of your time and effort. I believe this hearing at the subcommittee level provides our committee members the opportunity to have a better dialogue with all of you, with the commissioners, and better understand the assumptions and the details behind the recommendations. As we continue this dialogue over the next several months, we'll have a hard look at 15 recommendations. And we're interested in being sure that any action that the Congress takes will preserve the all-volunteer force as an underlying principle. And we know you understand that as well. Some of the recommendations may take longer to fully understand before we can act. And we know it would have been very difficult, actually, to have sustained our all-volunteer force over the past 13 years of war without the current compensation system that we have today. But we are entering a new reality, fiscal pressures with the new generation of citizens entering the military, and it is time to look at this and to look at it responsively. The commissioners and their staff have certainly, as I said, put in serious effort into this, and we, Mr. Chairman, as I know you believe, must do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Before I introduce the panel, let me just lay down some groundwork because we heard that votes will be somewhere between 1:50 and 2:05. We know that you have a hard stop at 2:45 to get across campus. So I'd ask to please keep opening statements short. To those of us at the panel, keep questions short and succinct and give enough time for the commissioner to answer it. And we'll try to muscle through as fast as we can, but we don't want to shortchange anybody's opportunity to give their opinions. In addition, I should say we're kind of now at, I think, recommendation 14 and a half. So recommendation 15 of the commission on a military dependent education category for disaggregating data, we just added as an amendment to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act reauthorization, which is going on right now in the Education and Workforce Committee. So recommendation 15 is already on its way to being adopted. We are again joined by an outstanding panel of commissioners. Again, please try to keep your statements to 5 minutes or less. Your written comments will be made part of the record. I want to welcome the Honorable Alfonso Malden, Chairman of the Commission, the Honorable Stephen Boyer, the Honorable Christopher Carney, Mr. Michael Higgins, who we all know well, General Peter Corelli, and Admiral Giambastiani. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Hicks, Ranking Member Davis, distinguished members of the subcommittee. My fellow commissioners and I are honored to be here with you today. We thank you for the opportunity to testify. As a commission, we stand unanimous, Mr. Chairman, in our belief that our recommendation strengthens the foundation of the all-volunteer force. It ensures our national security and it honors those who served and the families who support them now and into the future. Our recommendations maintain or increase the overall value of the compensation and benefits for service members and their families and provide needed flexibility for service personnel managers to design and manage a balanced force. Our blended retirement plans expands benefits from 17% to 75% of service members. while maintaining the service's current force profiles. It provides flexibility for service members and their services while protecting and improving the assets of service members who retire at 20 years of service. These findings are based on reasonable and conservative estimates, including TSP investment returns of 7.3% and retired pay costs of living adjustments of 2.3%. To maintain current force profiles, TSP contributions were not recommended beyond 20 years of service. However, the consideration of matching contribution that continue beyond 20 years of service may be an area the committee wishes to explore. Our recommendations promote essential high-level focus on readiness through a new Joint Readiness Command that can serve as a strong advocate for readiness funding and maintenance skill standards. They expand choice, access, quality, and value of health care by offering family members, reserve component members, and retirees a broad choice of insurance plans that are more flexible and efficient than the current TRICARE system. They maintain savings on groceries and other essential goods while improving the cost-effectiveness of DoD's commissary and exchanges. Our recommendations also save more than $12 billion annually after full implementation without cutting the overall benefit of service members. Our recommendations align compensations to the preferences of service members, which were partially measured through the more than 155,000 survey responses we received. Our survey methodology, which was new to the military community, captured preferences for the alternative benefit level. Its analytical tools then enabled, for the first time, direct comparison between the value that service members place on varying compensation and benefits packages. The survey validates the many comments we received from service members and their families at the 55 installations that we visited. Our recommendations incorporate substantial consideration of potential second and third order effects, which are reflected in our implementation timelines. Advancing these implementation timelines due to budget constraints may lead to an unanticipated cost, implementation challenges, or even failed modernization efforts. An example may be accelerating the multi-year back-end operational efficiency of our commissary and exchange recommendations. In closing, my fellow commissioners and I, again, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today, and we stand ready for your question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So no other opening statements?
That's it.
Great.
Thank you.
We will now begin with a 5-minute round of questions for the members of the panel. Again, I want to thank all the commissioners for being here, and certainly I've got a lot of questions that probably go too far into the weeds at this level that we'll probably address in later hearings or roundtable briefings with some of the commission staff members. A couple of quick ones. You know, when we talk about some of the rationales and assumptions used to come up with some of the recommendations, I was intrigued by one of the healthcare recommendations, specifically when it went to the dependent healthcare and enrolling them in some type of FEHB-like program and not under TRICARE. From the report, and I'll quote, there's a limited provider networks. Another important part of good access to care is having ample healthcare providers available to provide treatment. TRICARE networks of civilian healthcare providers, however, are limited because TRICARE reimburses providers for healthcare procedures at a rate equal to or lower than Medicare reimbursement rate. By reimbursing doctors at rates equal to or less than Medicare levels, which are less than market rates, TRICARE has been unable to attract enough quality doctors. In contrast, commercial insurance carriers in the civilian sector offer fair market value for physician services. As a healthcare provider for over 30 years, I question that assumption because most, even private health insurers right now, base all their reimbursements on Medicare rates. And so there's really not, I think, a big difference between what you're calling fair market rate and what most private healthcare insurers are providing as reimbursements to their network. So can you walk me through that, how you came up with that statement?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Commissioner Boyer to speak directly to that question that you have there.
If I could to the members, I'll move this a little forward so you can see it.
Thank you.
So what we did is we took the time to actually get into this question. So with regard to the contractors themselves, Congress basically said, and Ms. Davis, you did this too, put pressure on DOD to say, you know what, we need to rein in this program a little bit. We want it to be Medicare rates. What did the contractors do? They even took it further. Began to negotiate with providers for rates below Medicare. What impact did that have upon the system? Began to limit the network with regard to providers that would participate under TRICARE. So if you can pick, we chose 3 different areas: Fayetteville, North Carolina, Phoenix, Arizona, and San Diego. We chose different specialties and began to examine them, Mr. Chairman. So take Fayetteville, North Carolina. With regard to OBGYN, we said, okay, who of the network, if you look at the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan,
I've just been informed that you need to be on a microphone somewhere so it gets recorded.
Here, just pull that one up there.
if you look at at Fort Bragg, Fayetteville, North Carolina, for OBGYN, and we said, okay, what does a robust network look like? So what does Blue Cross Blue Shield provide? How many OBGYNs signed into Blue Cross as an acceptable provider under their standards, right? 114 at Fort Bragg. GEHA, the Government Employees Health Association, I would call it a similar plan to what TRICARE offers. How many signed into a GEHA plan? 43 providers. How many signed into TRICARE? Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, 87. How many signed into the TRICARE program? 36. 36.
No, I
Now, you
understand.
can go down all the different specialties here.
Now, I agree with you that there are fewer providers in TRICARE than in the private plans, but how do you draw
No,
the
in the
analogy?
private plans, this is in TRICARE.
No, that's what I'm saying, in the TRICARE versus
So in
the private plan.
Versus the private plans, so you've got 114 OBGYNs.
But how do you
Blue
make
Cross.
the connection that the reason for the lower number in TRICARE is due to reimbursement rates? That's my question.
Go talk to them. We've done our sensing sessions. We went around the country. We spoke to the family members. We spoke to the service members, and it is a reimbursement issue that these providers are not signing on to TRICARE, and it is a very severe issue. It's a severe issue. You asked us to look at this program, and my commissioners and I, we agree. TRICARE is a broken program. You are going to receive a lot of pressure from those across the river and institutions and the contractors to convince you otherwise, that everything is okay with the TRICARE program. All we need to do is make little tweaks here and there and everything's just fine. Do not get sucked into the status quo. That's my best counsel to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. My time has expired. Ms. Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to follow up with this because I think the healthcare piece is really such a critical one. So you mentioned the fees that physicians would receive. What other systemic issues did you see in TRICARE that could not be fixed easily? Or
Well, one of the systemic issues is one you have to deal with every time. So what does the building do? Basically, you have a structure of TRICARE that has a limited provider network. It is very cumbersome with regard to its scheduling, and that's the access getting into the system, not only to provider, to primary care, but then also then to specialty care. You went through all the debacle with the VA, right? And what upset a lot of people, that there were some delays in getting those appointments. The greatest insult was the integrity issue, right, at the VA. We have that very same issue in DOD with regard to access to care and getting the delays of getting my primary care appointment and to specialty care appointments.
yeah, and
I would say there are others too.
another
I
one-
would add
what else?
contracting. I would add contracting to that. The whole contracting issue on these TRICARE contracts are 5 years, or 5 years in duration, and then you add another 3 while you go through the protest period. So we end up 8 years behind, and they're very hard to modify. So when new medical breakthroughs take place, they're not just automatically integrated into TRICARE. You got to wait till the next contracting cycle to get them in. So you're receiving medical care that's 8 years in arrears. We sent people to the National Intrepid Center of Excellence for traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. They got a care plan put together, and then they go to their post-compensation Some of it has to be done on the TRICARE network, and TRICARE refuses to pay for it.
Yeah.
I would also
One more?
I would also add that what's important about these contracts, I've said to you in the full committee that I personally believe, and I think our commission believes, that TRICARE is in a death spiral. Another way of describing how each cycle of contracts, when we're looking for money, we restrict some of the procedures a little bit, eliminate a procedure, we reduce the number of zones. We try to make all of these marginal changes to try to capture every dollar. We go below Medicare rates, which is part of what Commissioner Boyer was just showing you. And the bottom line is that service continues to get less and less. It drives down that access and choice and the providers who are present. And this is why I call it a death spiral. It has continued since inception to move in this direction.
Ma'am, one of the biggies is utilization management. So when you say, where does a big chunk of savings come from? It's going to be in improved utilization and program management. And so our modeling estimates about $5.2 billion in savings because the TRICARE model does not have this right now.
As you move in talking about the military federal employee benefit plan, would the MTFs not be utilized? And is that not a problem as well?
It's absolutely critical that they be utilized. It's
But
absolutely.
what if they go outside the system? Wouldn't they go outside the system?
They will be available in all our plans to be used by dependents. So dependents will have the opportunity either to go on the market to a private provider or to use the MTF. The MTF, this is going to strengthen the MTF. And I would just remind the committee, the number one requirement that we have a separate healthcare system is combat medical readiness, the ability to pick up doctors and move them to a field of battle. Everything we do with this system has got to be built around ensuring, as I mentioned before, that the individual that is wounded on the first day of battle gets the same kind of care that the person on the first day of the 13th year of battle. And what we have to do is improve the kind of procedures and cases that are seen in the MTFs, and we think this will do that.
The intent is to incentivize in the plan, because the MTF will be one of the providers, is to incentivize the use of the MTF to draw the patients there.
In your discussions, though, did you talk about what if that's not the case? What if they do go outside the system? Wouldn't that be more expensive? And they didn't utilize the
No, they will be billed in the same manner. The MTS will bill for, as part of the insurance market, as part of the insurance plan, they will bill. So I think in some instances they will go outside, but that's one of the reasons why we think the Readiness Command is absolutely essential, is that Readiness Command has to be there to oversee this whole process and ensure that we're making the right investments in personnel and in our MTFs to make them viable providers as part of that insurance plan.
Ranking Member Davis, currently under the current system of TRICARE, people go outside now to get that care when they can't get it within the MTFs.
And Congresswoman, this is kind of about readiness also, and not just readiness for the active force, but also the reserve force. As a reservist who did not have good access to a TRICARE plan, it wasn't called TRICARE for us, it was called Try to Find Care. And that affects readiness. If you're not medically ready, dentally ready, you're not going to be ready to fight the nation's wars. So this access is also about readiness.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Mr. MacArthur.
Thank you, Chairman. I had, if I remember right, had read that the total savings from your TRICARE recommendations were about $6 billion. And I just want to understand what of that is the result of structural changes, and what of that is the result of cost sharing, increased cost sharing with our military personnel?
Yes, Congressman, for improved utilization and program management, just in that area alone, there's $5.2 billion. there's a increase to the cost to beneficiaries. There's an increase there of $2.0 billion. There's a movement as we shift to accrual funding. That's a $4 billion savings. Now, that gives us, of course, a total of about $11.2 billion. But what we've proposed is to turn around and invest in benefits to improve the quality of the program, which would be TRICARE Choice, and also to make sure that there are some other insurance reforms that would take place. So we've allowed for that. So there's about there's roughly $2.7 billion that is spent for the insurance reform. There's another $4 billion that we are spending here for making sure that we can put money back into the system to make it better with regard to choice, access, and improve the overall value of that program by expanding the network. So totally, yes, we're talking about somewhere between about $6.7 billion.
You lost me a little bit, I'm afraid. The first $4 billion, you mentioned $5.2 billion in utilization changes, so that's savings. $2 billion in increased cost to personnel, I guess in the form of either rising premiums or co-pays or however that's fleshed out. And then you mentioned a $4 billion that got you up to that initial $11 billion. What was that $4 billion?
That's the accrual. That's the shifting to accrual funding. When I talk about the cost to beneficiaries, that's that cost share increase there to the retirees that are non-Medicare eligible.
Help me understand the accrual funding. I'm not sure what you mean.
I'm going to ask Commissioner Higgins to talk specifically to that in that area, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The accrual funding deals with trust funds, and we have a trust fund in retirement, and the Department of Defense pays into that trust fund every year the cost of future retirements for people in the force. We would propose that for health care, that the non-Medicare eligible retiree be included in a trust fund. So we would begin at that point to pay for the non-Medicare eligible retiree health care out into the future. And the DOD actuary worked very, very closely with us on this. And the conclusion was that that normal cost percentage is what it's called, that contribution from discretionary dollars into the trust fund would be $4 billion savings that we would accrue to the Department of Defense in budget.
Savings against what other option? Savings against funding it in the future without accrual?
Savings against current funding levels that are being expended directly to health care.
I may want to visit with you later on that. I think I begin to understand what you're talking about. I'm not sure I understand exactly where the savings are coming from there, but I get the concept.
One of the future force that you're paying for at that moment is going to be a smaller force, and I think that's one ingredient that causes those normal cost percentage payments to be lower, to give you an idea of what you just mentioned.
So if, and this is just a conclusion, if we rejected the idea, and I'm not saying we should, but if we said there's enough change here, let's not also make our military personnel bear some cost, and we didn't shift $2 billion, we would still save $11 billion on this conversion to private healthcare networks as opposed to TRICARE. Is that a correct conclusion?
There would be an element of the savings that would not appear at that point. You would have savings that would be reaped by the Department of Defense because of increased premiums paid by the non-Medicare eligible retirees. Those savings, about 18% of the total savings, would no longer be available.
I thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Waltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you, Commissioners, for your hard work. And just like you, our major concern here is whatever we do must not negatively impact national security We must maintain the integrity and the readiness of the all-volunteer force, and we must keep faith with those warriors who are there. I understand, and your argument to be made is that you will negatively impact national security if you don't address these things. Because yesterday, many of us were up with General Dempsey, who made the case that it is impacting our ability to do that. And he made a pledge to us. He said the savings we get out of pay and compensation will be put back into readiness. And he's making a very solid argument on that. I said, the thing I keep, and again, it's for us more than you, encourage you on this, is what I heard him say is that as a senior enlisted guy, I'm going to go out and say, okay, you're going to pay some co-pays on this. There's going to be some changes to health care. We're going to go 1% instead of 1.5% on this, but you're going to get an extra rotation at NTC. So it's all good. That's a very difficult sell to them. Maybe not to the senior folks about what's going to be there, but that is what we're up against. And actually, not facetiously, that readiness piece is absolutely critical. And as a troop, I understand when readiness suffers, the nation's security suffers, as well as the well-being of your troops. They don't want to sit around, and they certainly don't want to be asked to go to war without having everything they get. So I get it on this. I would say this issue and the TRICARE one, there's some difficult challenges here. And one is, again, to remove it from it, there's a 900-pound gorilla in here of a large number of these people who are suspicious of moving off a program that they know. Again, the devil you know is better than the one you don't know, especially when they've been told that private market includes the ACA, which they're told might not work or whatever it might be. So it's very difficult. I can tell you this, on my last deployment, I had TRICARE Prime Remote that works beautifully. It's also very expensive. Am I correct, Mr. Booyer, in how that works? So we can't provide that for everyone, but what we're up against is my wife till this day claims the military's health care when you were deployed was the best insurance we ever had. It was all taken care of. You know, Tri-West handled it all and all was good to go. So I come back to you and ask, and last week the question I had was, I'm not sure which of you said this, but it struck me, said that you need to take this package and not start ripping it apart because you'll have second and third degree effects. It may be true, but that makes it virtually impossible to get it through here. And that's what I'm struggling with, because you're saying, because what I would say is, I think the housing allowance on the GI Bill is a lightning rod that is going to come back to haunt us in that it makes us appear like we're breaking faith, and then it makes this whole case harder. Because I understand, and I'm in full disclosure, I'm a life member of many of these VSOs. My question to you is, we can't break it apart. How much inclusion from the MSOs and VSOs happened in what you did, or did you try and isolate yourself from the case of undue influence?
Congressman Walt, let me go back and first address one of the comments that you made, if I might. We're not cutting benefits to the members of the force. That's not happening in our recommendation, number one. Number two, there aren't any trade-offs to this. The benefits, when we talked about the cost savings to the beneficiaries, has nothing to do with our service members that are currently serving. This has to do with those retirees that are non-Medicare eligible retirees that age, and that is between the time that they retire after 20 years or whatever that period of time is that they retire out of the service until the time that they get to the point that they can start receiving Social Security and so forth. So it's that during those working years, that's that 1% increase per year, starting at from the 5% that it is today under the current system, and it goes on a slow ramp of 1% per year over the next 15 years till it get to the 20% point. So that's cost savings there. It's not bothering anything with the benefits of the service members that are currently serving.
Chairman, is it concerning, and again, I appreciate that clarification, and I think I need to be very careful in choosing my words, but you've got a gray area retiree who's listening to this as a member of those, and I mischaracterized, if you will, because I have a predisposition to think that, maybe, in full disclosure. So what I'm asking all of you to do is, how do we get out there and talk to them about what their income could be? And I go back to this, I'm concerned about this. You either take this package or you mess it up. That's troubling for me, that I think it makes it much harder for us to do.
Go ahead, Pete.
I'm going to ask, let me ask Commissioner Corelli to respond first.
I made that comment, and I think it's just absolutely essential. And without getting into the specifics, that before you start taking it apart, you work with us so that we can, in less than the 3 seconds I have to answer your question, lay out for you how these recommendations support each other. Readiness Command is absolutely essential to what we're doing in medicine. And we feel that Readiness Command is absolutely essential because every single one of our recommendations in one way or another touches readiness.
So I need to see it as a whole, not three silos.
Or at least come to us and our staff, and questions for the record, that we can explain to you in greater detail how these recommendations work together.
Thanks, Sergeant Major. Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been listening to this, and I got to be honest with you, I'm a little bit confused. And Sergeant Major, you made some great points. 20, 30 years ago, I think I used to understand this, and now I feel like I'm in the middle of a calculus problem. You know, I'm retired, General. I used to, when I was younger, the big thing for recruitment, and a lot of us have recruited here, was the fact that the government would take care of you if you served 20 years or even longer. And things have changed. Now my primary health care is Medicare. My secondary is TRICARE. And when I hear all these conversations, it's like, and I try to listen to some of the veterans that I have there, they are, it's tough enough dealing with the veterans issues that we come down and dealing with the VA. And we're making some of these issues very, very complex. At least I'm not as smart as you guys. I'm just a dumb Marine up here that's trying to get through. And my primary concern is to take care of the troops, the ones that have gone through this. God, can't we make it any simpler or what have you? It just seems that we've thrown out the KISS principle, and for these veterans, for people that are on active duty TRICARE, and the changes to it every time we change it. And I was there at some of the meetings with Tri-West and how we're going to do it. I appreciate that you're trying to do something, but we've got to have a standardized message and make it as simple as possible. I don't understand the tables, and so many doctors are in this and that. All I know was that many years ago, I thought we were going to have medical care to take care of those people that stayed in long enough to retire. And that situation to me is constantly changing because of budgetary pressures, and I get it. But if we can simplify it, because the people that are watching, when I go and try to explain this to them, I can explain, you know, tanks and airplanes and everything else. What you deal, it's, as I said, this is like another calculus problem, or a calculus course, which I didn't do first time when I was as an undergraduate. So I don't know if I have a question. I just am. I was concerned about where those individuals that are on Medicare and TRICARE. It seems like no one even wants to address TRICARE when they hear I have Medicare. And they don't default to that because it's too complicated. Is that a correct statement or not in terms of the medical world out there right now that I deal with?
If I
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Giambastiani.
Yeah, let me try to take this. First of all, if you look at this panel, I'm guesstimating that we have something like 140 years of military experience up here.
Somebody older than me then, right?
Yes, there's many of us who have some age. We're all geezers. And let me just say that we have spent a lot of time trying to make sure we're taking care of the troops because of the pain that we've gone through in seeing how these systems either work, don't work, or continually get degraded, which is why we came to where we are. So let me just quickly encapsulate one. If you're retired and you're a Medicare, Social Security eligible person, I am, you are. Pete isn't there yet, or you're close? 1 month. 1 month. Okay? If you are in that case, you will continue to serve with TRICARE for life and Medicare. None of that changes from today for a retiree who gets to that. The area that the chairman already talked about, the working age retiree, you're not Medicare's of health care plans that are a separate risk pool just for military. This is not the federal program that we're just jumping into. This is separate for our folks to protect them, but the big thing is the military treatment facilities are in that program. Then, for active duty, we still use the military treatment facilities and all of the military medical care for the active duty personnel. No differences. What's different now is that we have TRICARE Choice for dependents, folks who can't get to a military treatment facility, for example, like a recruiter, people out in the hinterland who are out doing the work for our military today. They're in that same type of program, if you will, that our retirees are in, except that we give them a basic allowance for health care to defer the cost of the premiums and the co-pays and the rest of it. That's as simple as I can make this system for you. It is a change, but we think it will significantly improve access, choice, and frankly, the quality of the system.
Thank you. Ms. Songus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. I very much appreciated your presence before the full Armed Services Committee. I thought it was one of the better, if not best, hearings we've ever had. And I think your conversation today is very reflective of just the ways in which you've really worked very hard around some very complex issues and the deep understanding you bring to it, both the politics of change, which are always so difficult, especially as we deal with our military who so ably and nobly served our country and for whom we all feel a deep obligation to do the right thing. And I know your task was not a simple one. I'd like to sort of turn away from the changes to health care and focus on one of your recommendations that I think actually highlights a real plus. And that was the, your efforts and your recommendations about reforming the military pension system. So as you stated in your report, more than 4 out of 5 service members currently leave the military before reaching 20 years of service, and thus they leave this force without any retirement pay. I think this is particularly true and egregious of our nation's ground combat troops who have been repeatedly deployed over the past decade. And today, fewer than 15% of U.S. soldiers and Marines will serve a full 20 years, meaning that most will separate from the military without any retirement savings. So I'd like you just to give you the opportunity to sort of highlight the changes you're recommending that can make a real difference so that those who do so ably serve but don't commit or serve for 20 years, when they walk away with something that makes a real difference as they move into civilian life. And also, if you could just talk about the trade-offs you were thinking through. I mean, I think this is a real plus that needs to be highlighted, especially for those who might think they're losing in other areas, and how the balance was struck. Were you thinking that way? And I don't know who wants to take the lead.
Congresswoman, first, thank you very much for the question. When we deliberated on our recommendations here, one of the things that we really wanted to do, and we were unanimous in this, is that we wanted to make sure that we could actually expand that number of service members that were actually going to receive a retirement benefit when they leave the service. We were concerned about the number of people that come into the military and will make 2-3 deployments, in 2 to 3 deployments, or just stay in for a good period of time and then wind up leaving the service and did not have anything at all. We believe that the recommendation that we've made here to expand that percentage from 17% of the people that are currently leaving to 75% of the service members that would be leaving, we believe that that's going to really help with the retention and recruiting, especially with recruiting, because when these service members leave with something, they get a new start in transitioning into a civilian life again. But they also become goodwill ambassadors for the service, because they're going to be able to talk about the great experience that they had and how the services really took care of them. When we talk about really taking care of the service members, this is part of it. And I'm going to ask Commissioner Higgins to fill in some here with regard to the rest of your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the issue of trade-offs, what I would emphasize is that we believe our analysis. And we had what we think is very credible analysis by the RAND Corporation. And the trade-off was simply designing a system that delivered the force profiles, because that's what the chiefs, the Joint Chiefs, insisted that we do. That was our target objective. But modernization was what we found we really wanted to also achieve after we went out and talked to the force. They want choice. They want flexibility in their system. That's a new generation speaking to us, and we wanted to deliver on that requirement. But we wanted to hit those force profiles, and that was the trade-off. That's what led us to the thrift savings plan, which is a little richer benefit than you'll find in the government civilian FERS system. It's if they get 1% mandatory, and then if they contribute 5%, it's a total of 6%, which in the FERS system would be only limited to 5 over the long run. But there is that thrift savings plan, and that's how we deliver a benefit to those individuals that were not going to receive anything under the current 20-year cliff vesting.
So you're both creating a new opportunity. It does require people sort of opting in, and I appreciate the financial literacy component that comes with it.
Right.
You give those some training to think this through.
Exactly.
While you're also trying to figure out how to meet the needs of the force. But it's a plus. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my understanding that the new retirement system is all defined contribution. Am I correct in that? The proposal.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Congressman.
Was there a consideration for a bifurcated system that would be part defined benefit with a vesting period, and then maybe going later on, and then the other part defined contribution?
Congressman, I'm sorry. I heard the last part of your question a while ago. Maybe I didn't hear the whole thing.
Okay.
We have a blended retirement plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you briefly explain that again?
Yeah, the blended retirement plan is that we actually preserved 80% of the defined benefit plan. And so the defined contribution piece of that is the TSP. That's right. the thrift savings plan piece of that, where it's a government-sponsored program where the government will put in the 1% for every service member that ever entering the service, and then at the third year, the first day of the third year, then there's an opportunity for a 3% matching by the government if, in fact, the service member is putting in that 3%. There's a 3% matching that comes with it that could actually even go up to 5%, depending on whether or not the service members want to put in that amount of money.
Then when is the vesting for the defined benefit part?
It vests the first day of the third year.
Okay, and then when do they draw that? So right now, under the current system, you serve 20 years, and the day that you leave, you start drawing. So, and it's a factor. So if somebody serves 20 years, they get 50% of their base pay the day after they leave the military. What is it again under your system, proposed system?
Commissioner Higgins?
Sir, the vesting at 2 years is actually the defined contribution. Okay, the defined benefit remains a 20-year vesting requirement. They have to serve 20 years to get to the defined benefit, which is slightly reduced. We retain 80% of the cliff vesting, but we do reduce that multiplier to 2%, which yields a 40% of base pay at 20 years of service, and it is immediately drawn.
Was there any discussion about a bifurcated system whereby one could serve less than 20 years, vest into the defined benefit component, and then maybe not draw until as a reservist with reserve retirement? I draw at age 60.
Right.
Maybe then not draw till later on, that defined benefit portion. Was there a consideration for that?
It was certainly an area we discussed. Okay. Now, our recommendation does include a flexibility where the Secretary of Defense could come in and offer a solution like the one you're talking about and maybe see a change to the system for a select group of an individual MOS, military occupation specialty, or skill, or a segment of the population. So there is some flexibility in our system, which is important because that's derived by the services. I'm not sure I answered your specific.
So, no, you didn't. Now, on the TSP part,
Right.
defined contribution component,
Right.
is that a mandatory? So if I opt into this system,
Yes.
which then is an 80-20 split to the old system,
The defined benefit
so
is,
now it's 80% of
it's
the
80,
old
yeah, it's
defined
20% less, you
and
could say.
20%, right.
Right.
Then is that a mandatory, if, in other words, if somebody opts in, is that a mandatory participation in the TSP? Or can they simply, well, I don't know why somebody would do it if there wasn't, I suppose, yeah. There would- yeah,
The thrift savings plan
It would be
for
mandatory.
new entrants
yeah,
would be an automatic enrollment
Okay.
at a 3% contribution.
and from the, okay, what is it a 3% match as well?
No, not initially. The 3%, any matching government contributions don't start until the first day of the third year, so immediately after
Okay,
they serve
so
2
it's,
years.
it's all based on the individual service member initially for the first 3 years.
Right,
if I understand.
they're enrolled automatically. They can pull out, and it's not an arduous process to pull out, but our analysis would indicate that a very high percentage, 97%, would not bother to remove themselves from the program. So we're really encouraging thoughtfulness about saving and finances.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And they would choose certain investment,
The thrift savings plan is the same
Same as
thrift
the
savings
federal.
plan available to you.
Okay.
All those choices are there.
okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Spear.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And again, to each of you, I think you've heard it over and over again, but your contributions have been profound. And I would agree with my colleague, Ms. Songus, that it's probably the best hearing that we've ever had. We just now have got to inject a little guts into all of us to do the right thing. Let me start off by addressing, as we heard earlier this morning about how we save money within defense, the biggest way to save money, the most effective way, is through military personnel. And they had suggested about $6 billion would be saved through health care and about $2 billion through retirement, I believe was what they said. And as I look at the health care component here, if in fact what we're saying is that it's going to go up 1% per year, is that, am I understanding that correct? 1% per year. And right now it's about $535 a year, is that right?
I don't know the exact number, but that's pretty close.
Yes.
Pretty
So
close.
in 1994, when it started, it was a 27% premium. It's eroded to 5%.
So it's costing about let's just say round numbers, $500 a year. A 1% increase is $5. I mean, I think we have to pitch this for what it is. You're going to have better health care, you're going to have a bigger network, and it's going to cost you one Starbucks latte a year. Are you
Bingo.
in?
Bingo. Yes. Thank you. Conclude the hearing.
Totally agree with you.
So, we've got an education job to do, and I think we've got to man up to what we have to do, because this is critical to the readiness of our troops, to the ability of our Department of Defense to be properly funded, and to the American taxpayers who don't want to spend any more money on anything. So I just wanted to clear that particular point up. On the TSP, the active forces now would be able to sign up right away, correct?
They can sign up today, and they do. The participation rate in the thrift savings plan among active duty people is roughly 42%. What they would not and do not get today
Is the match.
Is the match.
So would they immediately get the match if they're active duty today, or would they have to wait the
The match would not start until they completed their 2 years of service. The first day of their third year
But
is when the
let's say
match.
they're already serving.
They're already serving. They're automatically enrolled, a 3% deduction from their pay. and a 1% mandatory government contribution.
If they opt in.
Well, this is, I'm sorry, are you talking about currently serving people?
Right.
If they opt in?
Right.
The answer would be yes, then.
So
I
they
mean, I
would-
was referring to new entries.
No, I
new
understand you were, but I was trying to address the fact that if we have active military now, they are
Yes.
contributing, they would start getting the match, correct?
That's correct.
And they wouldn't have to wait 2 years because they're already active military.
Assuming they've been in 2 years, right?
Right.
But they would have to opt in.
But they would have to opt in.
Right.
So the
They can
entire
stay under
new
the
plan.
current program if they so desire.
Now, in terms of the contractual relationship that exists in a defined benefit plan, for those persons right now who are in military service, working towards their 20 years, have not yet reached their 20 years, do we have a contract with them to allow them to stay in the old system?
Yes.
So this is only going to be for persons who are new,
New
Enlisted.
accessions. Correct.
coming in after the law passes.
Correct. Or those that opt in
Or
that are
those that
currently
opt-
serving.
And quite frankly, we expect that number to be fairly high, particularly if you haven't served for that long.
Right.
Right.
And you
Right.
plan to
So for
stay.
anyone who's presently serving in the military, their pension isn't going to change
Correct.
Unless they want it to.
unless they wanted to.
Right.
Correct.
But anyone today, regardless of whether you've served 1 year or 10 years or the 20, nothing is going to change.
Correct.
That's correct.
All right, it's really important for us to get that. So for all the people we're talking to that are in service right now, nothing changes unless they want to participate in this new TSP that's going to have a much more healthy match by the federal government.
Right. And other elements of our proposal, which is continuation pay would be paid, the option to go with a lump sum on
I'm
retirement.
sorry, my time has expired, but thank you very much.
Mr. O'Rourke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to continue this line of question and the comments made by Ms. Spear about the political guts necessary to pass and implement the work that you brought before us. Talk a little bit about the survey and the surveying that you did. And I know that you published the questionnaire and the results online, and I thank you for your transparency. Talk about how those survey results factored into your recommendations and whether or not there's been any survey since the whole of this has been presented, and if so, what the feedback is on that. I think that might inform some of the work that we have to do in order to ultimately pass something like this.
Thank you, Congressman, for your question. We actually surveyed 1.3 million retirees. We actually surveyed over 550,000 active duty reserve component members. And the survey, and we not only surveys, and I got to tell you that in addition to the surveys that we conducted and the responses that we got back, we actually also collected all kind of comments from service members that came back to us, both retirees as well as active component members, saying, here's what we prefer as a value. This is what we value, and in terms of our benefits. Here's what we, and part of what the reason we got to the recommendation that we got to on retirement is because they came back and said, we want something different than a one-size-fit-all under the retirement plan that we currently have. We want to be able to participate in that decision. We want to be able to tell you how to design, how we'd like to see our retirement plan design, and how we would like to receive the benefits of that plan, the compensation plan. So what we have put together here came from both the surveys, the results of the surveys, as well as the different hearings, the town hall meetings, and the other comments that we received by way of our website, as well as comments coming into the office.
And
Combination
I
thereof.
understand that, individual alternatives were surveyed. Was the final product surveyed, or did you all solicit feedback from military service organizations, VSOs, and
Absolutely.
the answer is yes. Okay, but the results weren't it informed and was a factor in the decisions that you made or the recommendations that you made. But if something scored very well and was very popular, but you thought did not make sense, you did not make that recommendation. Is that?
That is correct,
Okay.
yes.
And if I could, from Mr. Booyer, would love to, following that, in some of the questions that were just answered, you were in our shoes. How do you move forward to produce the necessary political will in and out of this institution? I'm again thinking about veteran service organizations, military retiree organizations, the people who come to my town halls every month, and you know, it may just be 1%, but they look at that cumulative total over the next, you know, bunch of years, and it adds up, and they have legitimate concerns about that. How would you present this in a situation like that?
I think in the exercise of your intellect, be methodical would be my best counsel to you. Methodical in that you've given us an assignment. You put together this commission. We've worked very, very hard with a very talented staff. We dove into the issues that you get to work with, but we went deep. And you don't get the luxury of that time to go deep, as we have done, and to listen to so many across the force, and then to survey it, be responsive to so many different concerns at so many different levels, and to go into the third and fourth degrees of consequences. You only dream as a member to do that kind of thing, but you never have the time to do it. The luxury was you gave us that assignment. So we applied our intellect to do that, and our scholarship is in a report. Now, you also must filter. You have to filter the difference between the constructive critic and the critic. You also have to recognize that there is a bureaucracy out there that I call the mud or the muck, and they're defended by gargoyles. And those gargoyles that defend the muck will try to suck you in and hold you in place. And being the agent of change is never fun. And that's what this committee gets to do. You get to be the agent of change because the force is ready and the time is now. So be constructive. Listen to the constructive critic. The noise will always be there. They have to respond to membership. They have a different constituency than what you have.
Thank you. Thanks again for your work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the committee for their work too. I have just a couple questions, and I think we're hitting down on it of the survey. The survey was presented to service members of today, and they were asked if there was another situation, would you like it better? And you probably gave them some parameters, and then you went back and you gave them another survey after the parameters were set. Is that correct? Of the new program? Because I'm looking at this survey right here that says 80% of active service members would prefer the current or proposed compensation system, and it says 80% would prefer the preferred proposed system. That's a tongue twister in itself. Was the survey before this presented the same way and said that if we gave you this option to have this type of a system as opposed to your current system, so it was apples to apples? That's what I guess I'm asking. And
Yes, I think the
everybody's-
answer to that question is yes. I mean, what we really asked our service members to do in that 155,000 responses that we got back from the survey, we basically were asking them to actually stack and rank benefits in priority terms for them in terms of what they preferred here with regard to that benefit. And then, so you give us an answer as to what is valuable to you as a benefit. Then we ask them to continue to compare one against the other. So they were, you know, they were basically asked. We used the survey as an analytical tool to really get them to really not only tell us what they value, but then to give it to us in terms of priority, one against the other, one benefit against the other.
So as I'm going down my line of thinking here, I think it's fair if you offer somebody something and you say these are the parameters of what you're getting, your system is going to be, your retirement system or whatever it is, then I think it's fair. If you offer a choice to the people who are currently serving or currently employed, as it were, and out in the private world, you have the option. You can jump onto this new program or you can stay on the program. I think for us that have to sell this, that's a big selling point. We're giving you a choice, and you can stay under the current program. So my last question is about retirees. So say there was a retiree that retired in 2008 or 10 or whatever it is. How does this affect them? Do they automatically change over? Because there can't be a changeover. There was no buy-in. They just stay under the old system, correct?
That is correct.
So I'm trying to figure out how I don't sell this. You have the option. If you don't want it, don't take it. If you do want it, it's probably a better system for you, especially for someone, like me, or enlisted out of high school and didn't serve 20 years. It'd probably be a better program for me. Or for somebody who served 35 years, it probably still is a better program for you. So I don't know. How am I not going to be able to sell this?
Congressman, if I were in your position, I would be asking that same question. I don't know how I would, knowing what I know from what we've done over the last 18 months to 2 years, I would have a very difficult time trying to figure out how not to get this done, to justify why we couldn't sell it.
Mr. Chair, we all have gargoyles in our district, and they all protect the muck.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it hard.
If I could add, I think the noise and misinformation, the gargoyles, whatever you would like to call it, that is what will muck this system up. Frankly, everything we know based on surveys and responses we get, when you ask people about these systems, they would prefer to go with this newer system. There's no doubt. I think it's going to be noise and misinformation, frankly, that will cause it not to be accepted.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Great. So since the bell hasn't rung, we'll continue with some additional questions if members have some. Mr. Jones had to leave. He has 3 questions that he'd like answered. I'm going to submit those to you for the record, and then if you can get him responses, I'd appreciate it. A couple of kind of just quick bullet questions that I have to make sure I understand some things. So service member is auto-enrolled but may opt out, but then he is re-enrolled the following January. Does that happen in perpetuity? So if he opts out the 2nd January, the next January he's re-enrolled again?
Yes.
Yes.
And the thought behind re-enrolling a person who's made clear he doesn't want to participate, let's say, for 2, 3, or 4 Januaries in a row?
Well, we hope that after the 3rd financial awareness session that we also call for, that new wisdom will appear in that individual's mind, and they'll understand the importance of participation and change their course. I mean, we believe that the financial planning education is very critical here.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, here.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm the father of a Lance Corporal who's now making a few bucks. And his question to me was, Dad, what do you know about Ford F-250s? I said, I know you can't afford them. But these kids are out there making these kinds of decisions all the time. And, how paternalistic do we want to be is kind of the question. And it's not really a paternalism question. It's a readiness question. Because a lot of these kids get in financial difficulty, and they lose clearances if they have them. Or they deploy, and they know they have financial trouble at home. And that's on their mind when they're forward. And that's the kind of stuff we're trying to get away from here.
Great. Thank you.
They're going to look at that. They're going to be talking to their buddy, and their buddy is decided to stay in, and it's going to show on his or her LES, leave an earnings statement, an amount of money that's accumulated. And before too long, they're going to be talking about, you really get 6% match, and this is an opportunity. And we just want to give them the opportunity to reevaluate their decision not to play as often as we possibly can.
So one of the things we recommend is altering the LES to reflect what they're getting and what the projected is. Sort of like when you get your Social Security thing every year, if you stayed in until 70, it's, that kind of thing. So it gives them some more financial awareness, and also we want to include the families in the financial literacy as well.
Great. I just want to be clear also on the match. So there's 1% automatic from the day the person signs the paper, and the auto-enrollment at a 3% deduction, which they can increase, decrease, or opt out of. but the government match does not begin until the first day of the third year of service.
Correct.
Okay, because that's what I read on page 37, and then on page 38, there's a bullet that says service members should be vested in their TSP after 2 complete years of service, the standard 1% contribution, and matching contributions provided by the uniformed services. But up until that date, there has not been any matching contributions.
That is correct.
Okay, just wanted, because there's kind of, it made me wonder. Okay. I will leave it there and yield to Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you help me understand a little bit more about the continuation pay? Because the plan has a the continuation pay bonus at the 12-year mark, correct? And then you can, and service members could be encouraged to stay into 20, but it only requires 4 additional years. You're assuming, I think, that the continuation pay would be invested into the service members' respective retirement plan. Is that true? And what if that assumption doesn't bear out?
Commissioner Higgins?
And I guess the bottom line too, Commissioner Higgins, is so what's the comparison of the monthly current system and proposed system at that point in time? So after the 12-year mark?
Certainly, we would hope that after receiving continuation pay, they would invest that amount of money. In some cases, it's not an insignificant amount of money. I mean, it does vary by service and
And we're roughly talking about?
amounts. The officer could go to $120,000. Enlisted member could be in the neighborhood of 20,000, if I'm not mistaken, depending on assumptions of what grade that it's offered. And that will vary by service because there are different multipliers used in terms of the number of months of pay would be included. And that varies by service because the analysts looked at that fine-tuning. We would hope that they are invested, yes. And to some degree, they're going to be able to put it in the thrift savings plan because many of these individuals are going to have room left in the contribution rate that the government allows in the thrift savings plan, so they can take some part of that continuation pay and put it in thrift savings. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year as well, and the year after that. So, I mean, that's our hope.
Is the whole program impacted if they do not do that? I mean, does it rest on that assumption?
It does not. I think in the long run, you know, if, let's say for argument's sake, there is no investment of continuation pay, then obviously the live stream assets available to that information are, that service member is reduced. We still believe that our benefits, again, widely variable based on assumptions, we still believe that our program will produce better live stream assets, or certainly as good as they have today.
I think it's fair to say, though, that we did not assume they would invest it in TSP when calculating our charts. Our charts are based on the fact that they would get an amount of money based on the services needs, both in rank and military occupation specialty. It would vary. And that money, at least in the charts that we've showed you, to what this is worth at 20 years, are under the assumption they do not invest it. If they invest it in the TSP, it would only go up, I believe, is how we've calculated.
Ms. Davis?
You're right.
For me, as we were putting this together, early on, when we talked about doing the match on a TSP, we heard from the chiefs. And the Navy and the Air Force were very anxious. They were very nervous because they didn't want to create an off-ramp whereby the amount of money that are invested in particular MOSs, whether it's a nuclear to pilots to technicians, you know, if you do this, we've invested so much, they'll just off-ramp and go into the private sector. And so this feature, this is an attractive retention feature that also, when you talk about what are some of the principles of your thinking and the methodology, is flexibility and choice. And this is a tremendous value, and it really, when somebody hits that 12-year mark, they got some really fascinating decisions they get to make that they don't get to make today.
I think if I could add also on this continuation pay, what's important is we're trying to give the services and the Department of Defense, what we've recommended to Congress is to give them an opportunity, as you've heard from Mr. Higgins, to adjust the multiple, but as a minimum, it's got to be 2.5 months of basic pay. It can go up or down depending on that grade, military occupational specialty, and the rest. Number two, they could move it from 12 years to 13 years, is what we're also suggesting, but our modeling shows that at the 12-year point right now, that's the best thing. Number three, just to make sure we're all clear, they can take this as a lump sum immediately and do whatever they want with it, which is, and the modeling shows that this will help. That's why we call it continuation pay.
Powerful retention incentive.
Yeah, it's very powerful, and it keeps the force profile where the services want to have it today.
But it's also critical that they have the robust financial education so they make
Exactly.
good decisions with it. And that's a big chunk of one of our recommendations, certainly, and it's a big part of all of this. It ties it together.
Ranking Member Davis, I'd also just like to add that without that investment of the continuation pay, their net earnings, lifetime savings, with our modeling, is still to their advantage. Net.
Okay.
There's a net positive in their lifetime earnings with the recommendation without that continuation pay.
Thank you.
Mr. Knight, further question?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. What did the 20% say? What were their reasons for not liking the proposed program? Did they give any?
Commissioner Higgins, you want to take a shot at that first?
We do the same thing you guys do.
We're known as a paternalistic military force. We have very great interest in protecting the interests of our young service members. And I think it would be fair to say that we saw some of those feelings come forward in the survey. And these are generally from people more experienced people who've been in the force a lot longer, people that may not share some of the desire for choice and flexibility that is part of the mantra of a new generation that we want to recruit and retain. There was some of that, clearly. But it would be also fair to say, I think, that what people saw in the survey was very close to our final recommendation, because we had pretty good ideas about the solutions that we felt were viable and had importance, and the survey reflected that. And that's why you saw us speaking with such confidence that we could offer them the option to see, be visible, and to make judgments on.
I think part of the answer that Commissioner Higgins has given to you is from our verbal engagement with individuals, base visits, town halls, those types of things, as opposed to specifically in the survey. Yeah. In other words, you prefer the current retirement system. Why? I don't believe we asked that specific question on why do you prefer this over that. We just asked, if you were afforded these systems, what would you opt for?
Yeah, and I would just expect, in a prior life, I was a financial advisor, and the more you talk to people and the more kind of information you gave them, not advice, the clearer they were, and the better choices they made. And I just wonder if that, if you got further down the survey and you said, well, what about this? And you gave them a little bit more information. When you're 19 and you're getting into the military, you don't think that you're ever going to be 60. Or if you're joining as a career, you just want to serve and you just want to be in the military and be part of the mission. So I don't know that that is the thinking process from everyone. And so I think the more it goes down, I think more, if this is adopted, it'll start to become part of the culture.
I think
and
that's-
nobody will know any different.
I think that's why this financial training that we are absolutely adamant on is such an important component of this. You've heard us say it many times. You understand this from your experience, but when you're dealing with these young people, you just have to keep working on it. And you got to do it in a smart and coherent fashion for them.
Congressman, I want to provide you with a little more, and we'll do this for the record if I might, provide you with a little bit more information around that, around your question on that 20%. I will just add, though, very quickly, a lot of it really depends on where you are at that point in time in your military career. And people that have been in it for a while, they're closer to the retirement point that took the survey, they're more likely to want to answer that question and to say, they like the current system better because that's the one that they're in and that's the one that they're very familiar with. But we'll provide you with more information for the record if it's so.
I think part of it's familiarity. I do.
Yeah.
Look, if 80% of the people like what I'm doing, I'm a happy guy. So you'll bet.
Thanks. Mr. Waltz?
In my district, that's 51%, or 50, that's the way it works. I'm on just clarify the point. I think the thoughtfulness you put into that, I'm going to echo that again. I don't think it can be said enough because this is a tough lift. And the folks sitting right there know that. I understand. You know it as well as anybody. I'm appreciative of how you did it. I think this discussion on paternalistic is certainly true. It goes there. The one thing I would say is you took averages and things like that. I caution us all to think about this is all great unless you were retiring in January of 2009. There would have been some significant things that impacted you because of economic conditions in this country with the savings plan and the way it worked. Now, I know many people are saying, well, that's the nature of things. The markets go up and down or whatever. I would make the argument our commitment to these folks is different than just market winners and losers. These are folks who put their lives on the line, and so that defined benefit plan is certainly there. I would ask for all my colleagues to keep in mind, because we're going to get asked many questions. The question I would ask is, Congress has both a defined benefit plan and this thrift savings plan. You're asking us to choose between one or the other. Just a thought. Those are things we're going to have to, and this getting there and how we do all this, it's going to matter. Well, we will have the debate on this. It will matter on how our force looks at this, because my biggest concern on this is, again, how do we ensure, and you've thought about this deeply, first and foremost, how do we make sure that all-volunteer force is still there? How do we retain them? And I want to be on the record. I think you've brought up many intriguing things that are well thought out and going through. But I think if we ever divorce legislation and thoughtfulness from the politics and the will of those served, we make a mistake, because great ideas have died because of not ability to do that. So just as a thought.
You know, Sergeant Major, where in our examination, where we felt that systems were running well, we left it alone. So you asked us, is it possible to modernize the system? If so, where? Is it possible to be effective and find efficiencies? If so, where? At the same time, to be very responsive to a demographic for which you're recruiting from. And where are they today compared to when you took your oath as a young man? They are in a different place today. And the way their peers and their contemporaries, as they mature through life, and how they are being rewarded differently than in the military. I mean, it is different. So how do we prepare for that force to recruit and for you to be able to retain into the future? And that's part of our package too.
Well, it's a thoughtfulness, and I have to tell you, I am grateful for my colleagues here who are taking this in the right spirit and thinking this thing through. This is important work. It's going to matter. No less than the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs said, it's absolutely critical to this nation's national security to get this right on all fronts. And I think you see we're taking that seriously. So I can't thank you enough and really look forward. This is, we just kicked off is where it is. It's a long game. We got to figure it out. We got to get to the end. Thank you.
Ms. Spear?
To follow up on my colleague, Mr. Waltz's comments, under your plan, if I understand it correctly, you're still going to have for new enlisteds today, after the law would be passed, they would still have a defined benefit plan. It would just be 80% instead of 100%, correct?
That is
You
correct.
serve 20% at 20
Yes.
years.
But you also have the benefit of a TSP that's got a federal match that you didn't have before. And we should, I don't know if you've used this, but this is a very, I think, artfully done chart that if it hasn't been up, should be up, because it shows how, in all likelihood, the benefit could be actually greater than the current plan. I have just two quick questions. And maybe I'm somewhat impacted by having just seen The American Sniper. For those men and women who go into battle and do the unthinkable on our behalf for short periods of time and then leave the military, there really is nothing for them. And I think when the American public thinks about our military and making sure that we give them what they deserve, they want to make sure the folks on the front lines are getting some form of support. And the truth is, if you only serve 3, 4, 6 years, if you only do 3, 4, 5 tours of duty, my God, I mean, to think that we put them in that kind of position and then leave the military, there's really nothing for you.
Well, I wouldn't.
Besides the VA.
Yeah.
But, I mean, in terms of compensation, and I don't know if you've thought about that at all. That wasn't part of your charge, but.
No, it is part of our
We're in a
charge.
place no different than where Congress was after World War II. And they stepped forward with the GI Bill. Where we are today is not only do we do the GI Bill that is already there, but we also are doing more with regard to the war after next. And that's what this modernization of our package is. So what your comments are, you're in the exact same position, I believe, as Congress was in 1948 to 1952.
Congresswoman, I'd like to add, I'm looking at this chart here, though, and I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we are redoing this chart, and because we are taking a look at the lifetime earnings, and and I think the result's going to be the same, but we will be redoing that chart, and we'll make sure you get the update to that as we do it.
Okay.
Because we're just re-looking assumptions and those kind of things that I think would be very important to make sure that update is included.
So with my last 2 minutes, are there any areas that we haven't covered today that we should hone in on in terms of your entire proposal? We tend to look at certain areas and we beat them to death, but we may not be looking at other areas that are also critical or important. So if there's anything else that we haven't really spent any time on and you'd like to address, I'd be happy to hear it.
I will turn to my fellow commissioners and see if you have any comments to make.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Corretto.
I would really like to state the importance of the Readiness Command, not only from a medical standpoint, but also from the standpoint of every single one of our recommendation touches readiness in some way. The only way that I would disagree with Congressman Boyer is it is a lot like World War II, but in my own service, there were 8.5 million men and women who fought that battle for just over 4 years. We've done it with less than 1% of the population, and every one of them has been a volunteer. So, if we want to maintain this force and do these kinds of things, we need to ensure that we're watching the readiness issues.
I'd like to echo that and just suggest one thing. In individual discussions with a number of members, there are concerns about this creating another 4-star command. I'd like to remind you of something just for a moment, because everybody's worried about grade creep, and yes, you have 2 retired 4-stars sitting here. But what's important to remember about this is this was the toughest recommendation we came to as a commission. We debated this ad infinitum, frankly, for about a year on how to best help solve the combat medical readiness issue and to keep oversight. It's not just the 4-star command, but it's also on the joint staff, the creation of a doctor who is not submerged underneath some other division head, who is in fact reporting directly to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs on medical. So it's a combination. I just want to remind you of one thing to think about. Today, the United States government has about 2.1 million civil servants. We have 8,000 SESs. Okay? That ratio comes out to be about 38 senior executive service civilians for every 10,000 federal employees. In the United States military, we have about 1.36 million active duty. We have 994 flag and general officers. That ratio is a tad under 7. So you've got 38 senior executive service for every 10,000 federal employees, and we have just under 7 for every 10,000. My comment to you is, if you're really worried about grade creep, I'm not suggesting going after the civilian corps. I'm just telling you, give me a break here. I think we're making a mistake.
Ms. Davis?
I might just add, because we had actually a meeting yesterday around some of the stand-ups of multiple commands at times that perhaps were not appropriate. So I think that's partly where some of those questions are coming from as well. And just being able to really explain why it is and justify, which I think members are going to be looking for.
It's $50 billion. It's a big hunk of money. And when you look at the VA portion, although, you know, that's a separate bucket, you're talking over $100 million in healthcare. So it really does need someone to ensure that it's being done as efficiently and as effectively as possible. I would also add that the formulary issue is, you asked me another issue, I'm going to keep pounding on it every time I come up here. This formulary issue is absolutely essential. And I will tell you, the piece of paper that came out on the 20th from the Veterans Administration has not fixed that issue. It's not fixed it. And we really, really need to rationalize those two formularies.
Now, I'm going to follow up on that same line. So, you know, obviously, so now we have DHA, which has kind of assumed the role also of TMA. How do you see, what happens to the Defense Health Agency if we stand up a Joint Readiness Command and we do away with TRICARE?
We're not doing away with TRICARE in its entirety. Remember, you're going to still have TRICARE for life, and so you're going to need a much smaller administrative staff, so that, frankly, very large TRICARE and Defense Health Agency, that's part of where these savings come from, because there's significant reductions there. That's what happens to them. We can give you more detail for the record on this.
Probably explains why Secretary Woodson's on my calendar next week.
Can I, I'm going to go, yeah, he's going to have less kingdom, and he'll be defending the muck. Let me go real personal to you. So when you were in theater as a combat surgeon, the picture that someone took, that radiograph, that picture that was taken, do you realize that when that patient was then on the air ambulance to Longstuhl, when he got off the bus, when he was carried off the bus at Longstuhl, his medical record is on his chest, along with his x-ray. And you say, Steve, why is that in the era of the electronic health record? It's because there's no trust. You see, that x-ray that was taken at the Combat Support Hospital in Iraq for you is a different system that is located at the MTFs. Because the Defense Health Agency, they're funded differently, they buy things differently, the acquisition is differently. So when it comes to the combatant side of healthcare, it's owned by the services. So this recommendation that General Corelli and Admiral Gibastiani have created, this Readiness Command and the J-10, it's to ensure that it's become seamless and integrated. We have to stop this. You also need acquisition reform, but that was outside our purview. I'll yield back. But you see what I mean?
Sure.
You know, come on, Doc. We gotta do better.
Right. Well, votes are going to be at 2:30. I'll ask if anybody's got any last alibis. Okay. You know, we've touched on a lot of important issues, but we haven't yet delved into also a lot of issues. Like until we start talking about SBP and DIC offset, talk about a third rail, or if we start talking about some of the other issues that you've addressed. I want to assure all the subcommittee members that we will continue to address every one of these issues in detail before we come to the point of trying to make a recommendation on the recommendations. Again, I want to thank all the commissioners for your thoughtful work, for coming before us again. Appreciate the insights you've provided. Look forward to working with you as we slog through and defend the muck from the gargoyles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There being no further business, the hearing is adjourned.
Understanding the new method.